We light the first candle to honor Islam. She is the holiest and most secret inwardness of Allah. We light the second candle to honor Buddhism. Listen to the deeds of Kuan Yin, responding compassionately on every side, with great vows, deep as the ocean, though through inconceivable periods of time, serving innumerable Buddhas, giving great, clear, and pure vows, to hear her name, to see her body, to hold her in the heart is not in vain, for she can extinguish suffering. We light the third candle in honor of Christianity. She is so bright and glorious that you cannot look at her face or her garments for the splendor with which she shines. But she is with everyone and in everyone, and so beautiful is her secret that no person can know the sweetness with which she sustains people and spares them in inscrutable mercy. We light the fourth candle in honor of heretics. When the sacred masculine is combined with the sacred feminine inside of each of us, we create the sacred marriage of compassion and passion in ourselves. We light the fifth candle in honor of earth-based religions. The mystery of the divine feminine speaks to us from within her creation. She is not a distant God in heaven, but a present that is here with us, needing our response. We light the sixth candle in honor of Hinduism. I am Shakti as well as Shiva. I am everything, male and female, light and dark, flesh and spirit, perfectly balanced in one single moment, lasting an eternity. We light the final candle in honor of Judaism. She so pervades this lower world that if you search in deed, thought, and speculation, you will find Shekinah, for this is no beginning and there is no end to her. Let's take these words into our hearts. Life is androgynous. In other words, it contains within itself both the masculine and the feminine factors. The male and the female of creation come from one principle. All come from the one, and all will return to the one. All are now in the one, and will forever remain in the one. And as we think on these words, on the silence, and allow them into our hearts, I know that as a community we are one, and we are one within the one that is God. There is only one, expressing in infinite ways, revealing itself as all the good that we can imagine and agree, all that is life-sustaining and life-enhancing. And as a part of that, we are that for each other. We are community. We are one. We are open to truth. We are expressive of love. We are filled with faith. And we are one. And I am so grateful for this. And so it is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. I'm Rev Erin Marie Szymanski. I am currently kind of floating around the Columbus area and serving in kind of random ministry roles. But I started in Redding, California. It was where I discovered the Centers for Spiritual Living. And then I served for 6 years in staff ministry in Bellingham, Washington. So I've got to experience a few different environments of the Centers for Spiritual Living and Ministry, which has been delightful. And I'm really happy to be with you today. I'm thankful that your community invited me and has always welcomed me when I've popped in, just full of warmth and love. So thank you for that. Our monthly theme right now is honoring the divine feminine in all. And our theme for the week is the holy reimagined. And I loved hearing that that was the theme for the week. There was something about that that just kind of delighted my heart. And so I started thinking about ways that I have imagined the divine in my own life. And the very first thing I could remember was when I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and so I would attend Mass very frequently with my family and with the school that I attended that was Catholic. And I really was trying to figure out how God got to be in those little wafers. Because I was told that was God, right? How did that happen? And this is what I figured out. Maybe you figured this out too. There were people that flew up above the clouds in those bi-wing airplanes with the open cockpits like I saw on Sesame Street. And once they got up over the clouds, that's where God was. And God wasn't a person on a throne, but was like another big cloud up there, a wafer cloud. And the people in their plane, since they had the open cockpit, that was important, they could reach out with their little cookie cutters like my mom used at Christmas to make the wafer cookies. They could reach out with their little round cookie cutters and poke a little hole in the cloud of wafer God and bring those wafers down to us on earth so that we had God for Holy Communion. I had it figured out. The only trouble was then God had holes. And I was smart enough to know that couldn't be possible. But since clouds can, like cover themselves back up and fill themselves in, I figured the God cloud could do that too. So we were good. It is cute. Kids are full of that cute imagination though, right? They are exploring what these things are that we teach them about the divine and the holy. And they play with those ideas and try to figure out how that makes sense. Like, what does that mean? And what does that mean for me? And they play with it and explore it and imagine it. And it's delightful to have conversations with children about what it means for them and what they're imagining and exploring. And as we get older and we grow up, we continue engaging our imagination, but we definitely do it differently. And at that stage, that was the most my mind and my developmental stage could handle as far as imagining these concepts. But as I grew older and I started exploring spirituality and theology more, I expanded my imagining, right? My imagining changed and what I understood about spirit and God and all of that stuff. The imagining of it changed. But I stayed very, very devoutly Catholic. Up until my mid to late 20s even. And I did a study of theology for my bachelor's degree. I had a bachelor's in theology at a Catholic school, and really, really at that point, grounded myself in the truth that I believed the Catholic Church was teaching at that point. And my imagining of who God was and what spirit was absolutely tied to those teachings. And I started to believe that having a new imagining wasn't right, that I had to stop my imagining of the holy, my exploration of the holy, and really just believe what I was taught in a black and white type of way. And it's not even necessarily that any of my teachers told me I needed to do that, but at the stage of my life where I was and who I was, that's what I believed I needed. But I ran into a point in time probably around the age of 22 or 23, when I had started a Master's of Divinity in the Catholic Church at a Catholic seminary, that my understanding of who I was in the world and what I needed, and what I was being taught about spirituality and the Catholic teachings weren't aligning with who I was. But I didn't want to give it up. And so I ended up in a really painful, dark night of the soul, faith crisis kind of place for a year of my seminary. And it wasn't that God did that to me. I totally did it to myself because I refused to let myself engage and explore and imagine beyond the limitations I had set up. Even my teachers, I was at a really liberal type of Catholic seminary, and they were asking questions like, did Jesus really have to die on the cross? I mean, that's a pretty radical thing for a Catholic teacher to ask, right? And they were encouraging us to explore and to question and to not just take it all at face value. And I didn't want to go there. I wanted the clear answers. I wanted set boundaries. And so I created a really painful place for myself. About a year into it, after lots of prayer and work, sorry, I was warned about that. After lots of prayer and work and support from my community, my ability to imagine the holy exploded open. And it was radical and liberating and exactly what I needed for myself at that stage in my life. A God that was pure love and who demanded nothing of me except that I allow myself to be loved. And it was just absolutely freeing. And that new imagining allowed me to know more about myself and delight in my ability to live in this world as a being of God, and expanded my whole world and my spirituality and my understanding of the divine. Our definitions of the holy, who we think God is and what we believe of that, doesn't define God. The limitations I had put on who that God was didn't define God. It only limited myself. It limited my ability to explore the wonder of spirit and all that was there for me to learn and delight in of who God is. And the further we can expand our imaginings, the further we can work out the horizons and the edges of our beliefs and our imaginings, the more of spirit we come to know. The more that is open for us to explore and delight in. We can keep ourselves trapped and limited, but it's not the divine that is putting those limits on us. Imagining, that reimagining of the holy, of spirit, that is a creative, powerful force in the world and in our own lives. So I'd like to share with you two concepts that might help you and support you in your next reimagining of the holy in your own lives. The first is the story of Grandmother Spider. Grandmother Spider. This story comes to us from a number of different indigenous cultures, and a lot of them particularly in the southwestern area of the United States. And there are lots of different variations on this story, but it's very beautiful in all of its many forms that I have seen. So the story goes something like this. The universe, in the beginning of all time, was so dark that not even shadows could be seen. And Grandmother Spider, she sat in her web in the sky world, and she waited. And nobody knows how old Grandmother Spider is. And nobody knows how long Grandmother Spider sat there. But she waited. She waited for the universal mind to awaken and to speak an idea. And whenever an idea would be spoken by that universal mind, grandmother spider moved on her web, and she spun of light and energy that idea which was spoken. And so was created all of the light and every color and every form that we know in creation and everything that is still a mystery to us. And as grandmother spider would spin each of these ideas that came from the universal mind, she would not cut off the end of her thread when that idea had been created, but would leave the thread attached as she moved from the one idea she had expressed in creation to the next. And so, as each was created and that web stayed connected and tied from each to the next, so the entire web of life was spun, all connected in that one thread from grandmother spider. The sky world and all of creation is now filled with that light and that energy from grandmother spider. Now, this story of creation is very different than the one I grew up with, the one I was taught. And it's beautiful in its own ways, yes. The truth of that story reverberates in every thread of the web, and we could spend an entire Sunday just looking at that story and all of its implications and all it has to teach us. But for the purpose of me right now, what is significant of that is really how different that is from what I grew up with, and that the ability to see the meaning and the power and the beauty in that story was something I couldn't appreciate until I could stretch out my own imaginings of who Spirit is from the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the masculine, and the who knows what kind of on the side. That's kind of how it was taught to me. From moving from that into a grandmother creator. It's beautiful. And it required that moving out of my imagining of who God could be, what Spirit might be in the world. Did you know that there are female deities in a vast number of the ancient traditions of the world? I'm going to have to read off my list because I could not memorize all these. In Sumer, Egypt, Crete, Greece, Ethiopia, Libya, India, Babylon, Anatolia, Canaan, Ireland, Mesopotamia, even Judah and Israel have female expressions of the divine. And more, I'm sure. This list is definitely not exhaustive. That the Inuit people had a goddess of the sea and a mother of the ocean. The Assyrian and Babylon cultures worshipped a goddess of love and war. In the Aztec culture, there was a mother of the gods. The ancient Phoenicians had two female goddesses of equal status, a fertility goddess and a mother goddess. The goddesses of these stories and these cultures and these traditions, they were creators of the universe. They were bearers of children. They were the ones who provided culture and were valiant warriors and wise counselors. These female expressions of the divine. It blew my mind how many there are. And it told me it was time for my next reimagining. Time for me to expand the edges of my ideas of the holy again. So in this month that we honor the divine feminine in all, I was struck by a second concept I want to leave you with in your ponderings. Here in the Science of Mind and the Centers for Spiritual Living, we talk about the seed and the soil and the plant. Does that sound familiar at all? The seed being the idea, and the soil being that kind of neutral territory that takes the idea, that creative force that just says, yes, I take that seed and I grow it into its manifestation. That being the plant, the seed, the soil, and the plant. Well, there's another concept very, very similar to that, which ties into our theme for the month, which is that instead of thinking about soil, what if we thought about womb? What if the seed is planted in the womb? A neutral, creative force, a medium that takes that seed, that gives it all that it needs to manifest into something created from that seed, something magnificent and sacred and beautiful. It's a very, very similar idea, and it also is somewhat kind of radical sounding at the same time, depending on where you come from and your teachings. If someone had told me that when I was going through my Catholic Church studies, it would have been very hard for me, right? And so what I ask you is to think about how does that feel to you, the idea of the seed and the womb and the creation, right? If there's an area of that that's uncomfortable, that's totally okay. And what of it makes it uncomfortable? Is there a place in there where you can maybe stretch the boundaries of the imagining out a little bit and just sit with it and explore what that might mean? And if there's something about it that feels interesting and exciting, what about it is interesting and exciting to you? What about that can you push the edges of imagining out on a little bit and lean into and explore for yourself what that might mean? There's no coincidence that the word imagine and the word image are so similar. The word imagine comes from the Latin word imaginari, which is to form an image in one's own mind. To form an image in one's own mind is to imagine. So our imaginings, whether it's the idea of soil or of womb, whether it is any concept we have of who the Spirit is, those imaginings we have, those are the images we have created in our own mind of the holy. And our imagining does not capture all of what the holy is. And there may be times when one imagining feels right and then it doesn't. Or an imagining does not feel right and then it does. And that's okay to grow into and explore what that is for you. Is there a way in which Spirit is the womb of creation? Yes. And is there a way in which Spirit is grandmother spider? Yes. And is there a way in which Spirit is a cloud of something amazing up in the heavens, something we could fly through, something we can reach out from the cockpit of our lives and touch? Yes. And that and is so important, because whenever we think that we know what there is to know and we forget that there's an and, something bigger yet for us to imagine about Spirit, that's when we get stuck. That's when we get stuck. So every time we have a new and to explore, that's the time for us to reimagine the holy in our lives. And it's important when we have that new boundary that we're stretching out of our imagining, that we build a relationship in that place with Spirit. It's one thing to say, I can believe that Spirit's like a womb in this creative force. It's another thing to have a lived experience of what that means for myself in my life. So whenever I have a new idea that I'm reimagining of the holy, and I want to try to move it from my head place down into my heart place and my lived place. Sorry about that, I'll get used to that. Whenever I'm trying to do that movement from my head place down into my lived being place, what I need to do is start looking for that idea around me, in the world around me. How can I see that Spirit as womb, as creative energy and force in the world around me? How can I see that expressing in my own life? How can I come to know myself as the womb of the divine, in which a divine idea is planted, and I get to be the vessel in which it is birthed into the world? Regardless of what gender I identify or whether or not this body has a womb in it, the spiritual truth is the same. I am that vessel in which the idea can be birthed in the world. And the more I can explore that and play that and live that idea, the more I become that spiritual expression of truth in the world. The more it becomes a lived reality for me. And there have been ideas I've played with like that and thought, ooh, that's just not for me, that doesn't fit right now. And I leave it, and that's okay. And it just means that that little horizon that I've explored just kind of just stays there and doesn't grow out any further, because that's not my place right now. Maybe this other place of my horizon of who the holy is my place to explore next. There's this vast, vast territory that's waiting to be explored of the holy, inviting us and welcoming us to reimagine. To reimagine. So join me. Join me in reimagining the holy in whatever way calls to you, because Spirit is always inviting us to explore, to come know more deeply who Spirit is in the world and who we are as Spirit in the world. There's an infinite mystery that is just beckoning us all to know it more, to be it more in the world. And in a very sweet and profound way, the more we reimagine Spirit and push those boundaries out and explore that more, the more we actually come to know ourselves as expressions of the divine. So reimagine with me.